Hey everyone, welcome back to CryptoCache. Thank you for joining me here. Hope you're having a great day. Wow, we got all this liquidation on the downside fully swept here. The question is, are we going to bounce from here or are we going to continue lower? Well, we're under a descending trend and we're also under some key level supports that are new resistance levels for us. So I think we got to be very careful taking long positions into this. Altcoins are looking pretty good here now that full liquidation levels have been swept here to that 105 to 104K range we discussed at yesterday. We're also going to highlight and touch on the Wintermute Binance allegations there with a lawsuit, and just kind of keep you up to date on why things are moving the way they are and what to expect and prepare for moving forward. Let's take a closer look. All right, folks, before we jump into the backend data, quick reminder to hit the like button, comment below if you get a chance. Really appreciate the consistency on your part there for making my life a better place. So thanks again for being a wonderful part of my life and obviously just being fantastic viewers here. Appreciate you. Now, when we look at the backend data here, just kind of touch on this. We have a significant areas of concentration at 105K there. There's a pretty magnificent large sell order there at that level. So considering at that range to be a local resistance, all right? Now, once more, this can change quickly. Obviously, that number is shifting as we speak, but the concept here is that, key level round numbers, 100, 105, 110, etc. Those are all levels we want to pay attention to, and they're more likely to work as resistances and or supports. In this case, that 105K range is technically a resistance for us because it was a previous bottom here, or 105K was that 4-hour closure time frame not too long ago. I'll show you that on the charts, but between now and then, if you saw this from yesterday, wish I had a screenshot. I can maybe pull it up and send it later, the comparison, but there was a super large chunk of liquidation between 105 and 106, and that was supposed to be the local bottom. After that got swept, market makers got a little greedy and continued to push the price action down to as low as 102.9K was that local bottom here for us. So good news is we have less opposition to the downside, and market makers see that, so they're like, oh, okay, well, we can't sell anymore. No, everyone's wanting to buy this range, so we're going to go ahead and pump the price action with everyone else right now. So be mindful, short-term correction, continuation higher is likely. If we get into the 106, 107, 108K range, I'd be very, very careful. It feels like a trap. It's just way too early to tell right now. As far as upside, though, we should see 105 to maybe 106 as a better case scenario for this local push higher, based on just liquidation ranges in the last 24 hours. And we look at the last 30 days liquidation too. Majority of the macro liquidation has been hit. There's a little bit left as low as 102.8 and lower. But most of this liquidation that we see right here, it's all local. And we'll look at a different heat map to give you some perspective on what that looks like. But we can see Bitcoin has $400 million worth of longs liquidated versus 23 million in shorts. That's a pretty significant margin. That is what four? I mean, we're looking at like a 16-to-1 ratio almost. That is just pathetic. So that's kind of what market makers do, though, right? They drive you to this super scary place. Right now, we're at a 27 on the Fear and Greed Index. It's all the more reason to consider buying. I know I keep saying that. I'm more so referring to a spot bag perspective. Make sure that you are obviously being very careful with how you buy and what you buy. Just little position sizes as the price goes down, set limit orders. But with this fear being so high, it usually only lasts for so long and the price will recover inevitably. But we're in a really weird place right now. A lot of stuff is kind of funky, for lack of better terms. So that's just something to be mindful of. Altcoin season index, we did lose this $1.5 trillion market cap level, which is essentially that previous support. For lack of better terms, we could see the price of altcoins never really want to go below that. So what that tells us is that altcoins are suffering pretty hard versus Bitcoin. Okay, so they're underperforming very poorly versus Bitcoin, and this is just kind of a commonplace when you see this happen when so much money leaves the market. Okay, not to say it can't still come in. We can look at the altcoin, or sorry, the stablecoin dominance and kind of see what that looks like. But for the most part, this is generally not a favorable sign. So you do want to be averaging in carefully to altcoins. When I say buy the dip, I'm generally referring to Bitcoin because majority of my portfolio is Bitcoin, if that makes sense, right? That's just me personally. That's me. I more so like to invest for long term. And obviously I have a good percentage of my portfolio as well in some specific altcoins, mainly ones we cover here, but it is just something to be mindful of there when I refer to buying the dip. Okay, now let's take a quick look here at Bitcoin, get some perspective. We're going going to jump right into the backend data because honestly, these other metrics are fairly well flawed because when there's so much manipulation, so much price action, just precipitating out of the market, we have these really funky charts, and it's really difficult to kind of gauge patterns when you see that, right? And me personally, I usually like to wait for bullish or bearish back tests, and we haven't been seeing those lately. So you haven't seen very many, if at all, any short positions open the last 48 hours from my community because it's just inherently more risky to short what feels like the bottom, but taking a long right now is also a bad idea. So it's kind of a weird place right now. So don't feel weird or abnormal about like, am I a bad trader right now? No, the market just sucks terribly. There's no other way around it. And I don't want to blame the market because the market always gives you opportunities. But generally speaking, I'm sleeping through majority of these opportunities because when I wake up in the morning, Asian market's been dumping again and again and again. It's just kind of annoying, honestly. So that's kind of how it works. And oftentimes when the charts hit the old reset button, you should do the same thing. Go take a break, take a few days off from trading. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. So anyways, 111,000 is that point of control there, basically that larger time frame open interest range. We're going to zoom in, kind of see what's going on the last 7 days though, and see if there's any other outliers. There's really not a whole heck of a lot. There's maybe a 107K. We talked about that previously being the local bottom, new support, new resistance level based on that being a support level that didn't hold. So 107K and 105K roughly is that range of resistance. It's also going to work consistent with a descending trend as a retest there if we were to progress higher over the next couple of days. So me just thinking out loud right now, 105 to 107K seems like a logical consideration for a short over the next few days. Between now and then, a lot can change. Don't just hold me to that. That can absolutely change. But between now and then, we got significant amount of liquidation short delta still high. Bears are in control. When we zoom out, this is the 30-day on the left-hand side here, by the way. The monthly, there's still a ton of liquidation down as low as 100,000 and even 97K, right? So roughly 97 to 100,000 would be a solid take profit target on a short if the price were to continue lower, ideally from that 105 to 107K range, right? So once more, that may not happen, but it's just something to prepare for. If we look at the last 7 days here, this is just kind of giving us some perspective, a slightly different viewpoint. We can see majority of all liquidation here locally has been hit. There's a decent chunk at 102K left remaining, so I wouldn't be surprised we come back down here. But we're going to be paying attention to the higher highs and higher low patterns, as well as money flow index increasing as the price progresses higher if it were to. Those are things that we need to identify because trend reversals, they're kind of tricky in situations like this. We haven't really seen any firm trend reversals. Majority of them keep getting stunted out with local highs or in this case just completely stopped out before it gets a chance to progress higher. So there hasn't been a lot of good opportunities for either long or shorts here, unless you're taking a higher risk long on altcoins, which is definitely a possibility. We're going to look at some obvious outliers here because some altcoins are doing much better than Bitcoin, while others are just not, right? So we're going to try to identify that. Either way, let's jump into the daily time frame for Bitcoin, just kind of get some, do our due diligence here and just kind of get some perspective. I was looking earlier for some macro support in this range, and outside of the psychological support of 100,000, there's not a lot really here in this current range, giving us the indication that 102.8 is a key level, right? It just happened to turn around at that point. There's nothing super significant about it. So not a tremendous amount of support below the price. I mean, we can see some candlestick closures at 101 and roughly 101.5. So I do think 100 to 102K could be that local support for us here. And once more, just 100,000 being that psychological support. Looking at the macro structure, everything is fully bearish. MACD is diverging, stochastic swinging down, money flow index pulling back. It is above the RSI, which is generally favorable, just kind of letting us know that we're still seeing a lot of buying in this current range. So money is flowing in as well as it is flowing out, if that makes sense. And once more, that only looks at the last 14 candles, so it can be slightly deceiving. But generally speaking, we've seen a lot of bearish and bullish activity in the last 14 days, so it doesn't really tell us too much. 4-hour time frame is giving us the indication here that obviously we're in a descending trend. This is kind of the playout chart that I typically send, just based on 4-hour time frame being a good transitionary time frame, or at least a way to identify a transition. When we look here, we can see we were pretty well overextended at 30 on the RSI. We hit that level twice. Money flow index is below the RSI. Generally speaking, when you hit 20 on the MFI and 30 on the RSI, you will see a recovery, which we generally just saw now. Even though the MFI wasn't that low, it just kind of implies that were massively overextended. That massive overextension also shows here pretty obvious. We are at a 9 on TD sequential right here. Price got super greedy there. Bunch of fear injected into the market. And then at this point, the bulls are like, we've had enough. We're just going to go ahead and buy. And the bears have run out of selling. They can't sell anymore because they don't have any more. So that's generally the concept there. So that's why what must come up must come down in the inverse as well, because we're just seeing that overextension. That because the people that were selling, by the way, those overextended states to the downside, they're now buying, right? So they've shifted sides. Keep in mind, there's not like perma bears in the market. They push the price action higher just as well as they'll push it down lower to trick people into late longs, right? And they sweep the liquidity. It's just a whole rinse and repeat. But at this point, the 4-hour time frame, there's nothing bullish about it, minus massive overextensions. And right now in the market that we've seen the last few months, that's honestly one of the better confirming factors that I've noticed is to play on overextension and to buy the dips after liquidation has been fully swept. So that's usually where we've found our success. I haven't been able to find any good entries here in the last few days, just based on the simple fact that the market has been pulling back at weird hours, generally speaking, and during Asian market hours when I'm sleeping. This happens. So if you're part of our community, trust me, I'm looking for opportunities, but I'm trying not to force any either. And it's important to make sure that you don't do the same thing, okay? So friendly advice right now in these kind of conditions, slowly roll, pump the brakes. If you insist on trading, just keep it safe, keep it within your margins. Don't use more than 5% of your portfolio per trade. And you should also make sure you never combine futures and spot trading in the same portfolio because you're too tempted to sell one and go into the other, right? So make sure you have just two totally different exchanges or wallets, etc., for spot versus futures. Okay, that's just the general recommendation. But either way, it is what it is. Let's take a look at some altcoins and see if there's a good comparative analysis between some of these alts we're going to be looking at here today, and see if there's any outliers on lower timeframes for some scalps or some quicker trades that shouldn't be held either overnight or for very long. All right, we'll take a look at that next. Let's go. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, folks, before we jump into some altcoins, I just want to touch on this quick little rumor here just to give you some perspective on what's going on because Wintermute and Binance, essentially two very large entities, if you will. There was speculation. A lot of folks are rumoring about this. In fact, I got a lot of direct messages asking if this is relevant or true. And from what I can tell, there's no evidence providing realistic confirmations that this is the case. They're just baseless rumors. It's really just intended to get the views for other YouTubers. So if people are talking about this here as a reality, just be careful trusting that. Obviously, on October 10th, there was a flash crash. A lot of crazy stuff happened with Bitcoin. Specifically, Binance charts had like these massive wicks down. So most everybody using Binance got absolutely destroyed. So that's why that came to be. And obviously, Wintermute, a very large agency there with tons and tons of crypto. So just try to forget that is happening. I don't feel like that's the exact reason, but once more, rumors tend to spread, and obviously dumps can happen based on just illogical things of that nature. So please understand, it's best not to buy into that. Try not to be the person that likes those kind of videos, or perhaps just just does trades irrationally based on speculation. Okay. So anyways, just throwing that out there, giving you some friendly advice, if you will. In situations like this, cool-headedness is probably the only thing that's going to help you prevail, right? Try not to be too outrageous. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at Ethereum first, kind of see where we're at. Before we jump in though, we always like to get a foundation of back-end data here. So we'll look at that, and then we'll do a quick comparative analysis with Bitcoin and kind of see where we're at. So we're gonna have to zoom in because things have been just falling down so far that we got to kind of look at the local ranges and see. So this is the last 3 days of open interest, and the amount of open interest is heaviest at about 3,540 and 3,500. So it tells us our local bottom is in at 3,500, 12 billion in liquidation short delta, still at the same level, so that hasn't changed at all. If we take a look as well at the last 7 days liquidation, there's not a ton. I mean, there's still some, of course, but biggest chunk occurred at that 3470 mark that we identified yesterday. Okay, so now that that's hit, what do you think is going to happen next? Price is going to go up for a short while until we hit our descending trend line or our local high. We're going to try to identify the descending trend because that could be the initial indicator to let us know that Ethereum may be back on track, at least short term on the lower time frames, because we can kind of see here, you take the local highs, we have broken that sort of, right? So there's a bit of a stretch, so try not to buy into it too much, but the concept here remains the same, that breaking a descending trend line is helpful in a sense, just kind of letting us know that we have established a slightly higher high and a slightly higher low on lower time frames. Okay. Now keep in mind, this is the hourly time frame, so the lower the time frame, the less consistent these kind of trends are. But you can see that the comparison between these two coins, Ethereum's looking slightly better in the last couple of hours. Right? Obviously, most altcoins are going to look well because they finally bottomed out for the moment and they're recovering quickly. So be careful just taking along right now at this exact moment, but this is a slightly positive sign, okay? And I want to emphasize it slightly. All right, so all that said, that's kind of where we're at there for Ethereum, the 4-hour time frame. We're obviously still in this descending trend, running consistent with the 20 and the 50-day SMA. We can see 3460. 3460 is that local bottom here for us. That's how low we came on this descending trend. Now, when we look at the daily time frame, there were some previous support ranges. This is not massive by any stretch, but 4,000 running consistent with the previous low leads me to believe we come any lower. 3,400 is that level. Sorry, I misspoke once more. 3,400 is that local bottom, not 4,000. Even though 4,000 is a resistance for us, 3,400 is that potential bottom level if we continue any lower. So just be mindful of that. Once more, there's not a lot of faith in just a one-day closure here in the past. So just bear in mind that's just kind of a smaller number, but the fact that that happened before means it should happen again, right? So that's kind of the concept there. So we see the price go a bit lower, 3,400 may be a good consideration for a long, but if we look at the daily time frame, everything's fully bearish, consistent with Bitcoin. So there's really nothing here on the daily and the 4-hour time frame letting us know we should take a long. However, we do have a pretty significant overextension. We have a bullish convergence on the RSI. That was previous, of course. That's not what I'm referring to here. What is a good convergence is that we've held this level of 30 on the RSI pretty well, and we can also see our money flow index is increasing, and that's a significant outflow of money. So the reason why the money flow index came down so low is because we had, we were already overextended leading into this initial pullback, and then we pulled back again on top of it. So it's like, whoa, it's that massive, it's like adding insult to injury basically is what that is. That's why we're seeing the price recover so well, and the money flow index is kind of coming back up to that normal, or it's averaging itself back in, just based on the simple fact that it pulled back so hard, okay? So that's why dead cat bounces occur, because they have to. Those of who have sold so much, they're buying their own dips. That's basically what's happening. So anyway, so that's kind of where we're at for Ethereum. A little bit more detail than expected, but the general consensus here is that unless you're going to be scalping and looking at a very, very short-term trade for this coin, you don't want to take a long to the metaphorical moon. All right, let's take a quick look here at Solana. I would summarize the same scenario here for this coin. I'll have to update our fib levels here, but from a macro perspective, it's pretty straightforward. We kind of bounced off that local support of 158. I talked about that yesterday being a consideration for an average, averaging into your position potentially at that level. Let's go ahead and take a look at the back end level first here and see if there's anything going on. Last 7 days is kind of irrelevant. Let's look at last 3. Let's see if there's anything kind of letting us know where we're at. 168. That's just above the local high here. That could be our local resistance, upwards of 175. So if we do see a continuation higher, Solana 168 to 175 is a good take profit range. All right, that's generally how I like to structure my trades, just based on areas of open interest and local highs too. All that said, 3.5 billion now for liquidation short delta. While it's tapering off, it's not super substantial enough to warrant a long position with confidence. We take a look at let's go ahead and jump out to the monthly, and pretty much everything on the month is totally swept. Let's look at the last 3 days and just to clarify here the local ranges. I like to zoom into the last 3 days, just get some perspective on what could happen next. We are seeing consistency there between 170 and 174. So that kind of speaks to 170 to 175 as a round number, that little $5 range being the local resistance, but also more propensity for us to hit that level if Bitcoin can just go sideways for a couple of days. I said the same thing yesterday too, though, when it kept going down, right? All the more reason why you be very careful taking longs if you were to consider them, and make sure that you're not in a position, or you don't put yourself in a position to feel regret, remorse if you're trading, okay? That should never happen. But the reason why 158 was at bottom is because it was our previous low, okay? Our local low low, if you will, from August 2nd, that weekend there. So that's kind of why the price bounced here. In a way, it's also because Bitcoin recovered too. So it's not like a magical support level. But once more, you're going to find more consistency in previously tested ranges than you are with these wonderful Fibonacci retracement levels or Elliott wave idiots. Okay, that's just kind of the concept there. So when we look at the daily time frame, we want to recognize that we are not in terrible shape here compared to most other coins. What I mean by that is money flow index isn't super low, implying that we have more buying pressure than selling pressure, or the equal amount of which is relevant to the RSI. And those two things combining together, being kind of in the same level, leads me to believe that our local bottom is in. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Now, once more, daily timeframes, this is a stretch completely. I don't think that we're fully bullish at all on this coin. MACD, from a momentum standpoint, is super hard to the downside. Stochastic's pulling back. There's really no indication that we're in a good shape. So please take that with a grain of salt. But if Bitcoin can just say consolidate in this range for a couple of days here, and Solana does roughly the same, I think Solana would be more likely to bounce and recover higher or move consistent or 2x of Bitcoin than other coins, just based on the sheer fact that we hit our local bottom and we have good amount of money flowing in, basically implying that the volume is high on this coin. Now we look at the 4-hour time frame just to do our due diligence. Roughly the same scenario here. We can see most altcoins are looking like this here, where they're hitting that 30 level on the RSI and roughly sub 20 on MFI. That implies massive, super massive overextensions, as we've seen on the charts with Bitcoin and other coins, and not really a whole heck of a lot of confidence in wanting to take a trade right now. Once more, if you take a trade, it's going to be one of those things where you got to kind of recognize that this is probably a short-term correction. Now, all that being said, once more, similar to Ethereum, we're seeing somewhat of a descending trend break. This is not by any stretch a reason to take a trade, but you can see there is a general outperformance versus Bitcoin. And those are things you typically like to trade into. So if you're going to take a long, obviously, I would recommend a long on Solana over Bitcoin, but it's still inherently a higher risk trade. So make sure you do with that what you will, in which you want to secure profits when you can. And what I mean by that is we've already identified 170 to 175 as that area of open interest and liquidation. Therefore, that would be a solid profit target on a tighter long position with this coin. Okay, that's kind of the concept. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, let's go ahead and move on to SUI. Now, all these charts are going to look still pretty funky because my fib levels are drawn out from yesterday. And truthfully, in situations like this, fib levels mean very little because the price is just running, right? So we want to identify key level supports and resistances outside of that. And oftentimes you can do that with back-end liquidation data, etc. So let's go ahead and take a look here at open interest this last 7 days. Just to give you some perspective, 205 and 220 are those two ranges. I think if we zoom in, we're probably going to see just roughly a reiteration of that lower range here, which is once more 205 to 218. Yeah. So easy round numbers. Remember 205 and 220 or those either support or resistance levels for us. So the price were to recover and continue higher, I would say that a 218 would be the appropriate consideration for a take profit target, or somewhere just below that range. Once more, open interest ranges are retested consistently in trading. So if we were to progress higher and break this range, Bitcoin stabilizes, maybe runs towards 105 to 106K, that local resistance, 105 to 107K. Then we should be able to see somewhere in the range of 215 to 220 for SUI. Liquidation delta is still high to the downside, i.e. don't take a long. If we take a look at liquidation, roughly the same scenario here. Once more, this is the last 7 days, but we can see a ton of open interest. Sorry, that is liquidation at 190, okay? So if we lose $2, 190 is the next potential area for SUI. Now taking a look here, this isn't super substantial. This isn't really a great comparison. What I think I like about SUI is the fact that we're consolidating nicely at this $2 range. Okay, so it's holding well. It's once again that psychological support. So there's not a lot from the comparison we can extract, but we can see obviously we are overextended. This range here, even though most other coins pulled back significant margin in the last 12 hours, like i.e. late last night when Asia dumped, we can see here roughly the same scenario for this coin. In other words, it did well, but it also pulled back. Good news is it never lost, and it isn't really truly establishing lower lows and lower highs like most other coins, so I do like that. Anyways, it's a consolation It's never a reason to trade, but sometimes those little things can matter, and it's important to kind of pay attention to them. So we're just going to make sure that we have our charts kind of laid out here, and just recognize we're still in a descending trend. Our local high will be 220 because once more that's our previous bottom that hasn't been retested as a new high yet, and it's consistent with our open interest range and liquidation too. So I think 220 is a better case scenario for this recovery. I wouldn't be surprised we see something like this. We break our descending trend. Everyone is all hail. SUI is going to go to the moon now. Oh my gosh, let's go. And then all of a sudden we get dumped out because we hit our local high, or Bitcoin pulls back and SUI is 2x the Bitcoin to the downside. Once more, those are things that could happen. Is it a guarantee? Definitely not. But I would say that this range of $2 to $190 would be a good consideration for an average entry down. And I would think that a take profit target between now and 218 to be safe would probably be a better consideration. This is all reliant on Bitcoin stabilizing and not pulling back any further. Okay. All right, cool. XRP, there's kind of, generally speaking, the open interest ranges are very sporadic for this coin because people are just buying every potential area, likely because influencers are telling them to. But once more, we all know they're XRP idiots, and we don't want to pay attention to them. If you are interested in laughing a little bit, jump on over to our stupid thumbnails section. Problem is they do live among us, right? People like this actually exist, and it's a really crazy thing to me. But once more, get your laugh on over there if you want, and let's see what we can find out here. So on this pullback, obviously, when we look at the overall circumstance, XRP is still in a descending trend, as with other coins. But we can see on the lower time frames here, specifically last 4 hours, this candle wick looks a lot like the Ethereum chart, where it recovered quickly and nicely here. So that bounce is getting bought, right? Most bounces are getting bought. And we identified too that there was that solid amount of open interest and liquidation at that 220 to 230 range. Okay, so we can see a majority of that was hit there, specifically 225. So now that level's hit, the market makers have done their job. They're going to recover the price, and as per usual, we're seeing the price shoot back up. Let's look at the last 3 days of liquidation and see if there's anything that may be left remaining. And there's more up to the upside than downside. And this coin does have a lot of liquidation, upwards of 245. That's kind of that local high. So I think that's the range that we want to maybe consider either a take profit target, or just a place in which we're probably likely to reject out. Let's double check the hourly time frame here and just kind of see. Very similar pattern here too, as well with this coin to majority of the coins we looked at. I'm willing to speculate most altcoins are structured like this here today, where we have this lower high pattern. We just broke our lower highs with higher highs so far. We have yet to see these higher lows happen, because every time we see the price action establish higher highs, it pulls back, right? So we need these higher lows to be there, right? So we need it to be something like this where the price continues higher. Between now and then, it's obvious that XRP is performing better than Bitcoin, but as we can see, Bitcoin's struggling in the last hour since this recording, and a lot of altcoins are kind of stunted out for the moment, okay? So Bitcoin can recover 105 to 107K, which I think is still a distinct probability here based on this massive overextension. I think we are due to see some coins pump here, at least some altcoins in the short term. There's a ton of fair value gaps here above the price. Same with Bitcoin too. It's another reason why I think 107K is a probability for Bitcoin, just based on that significant amount of correction here that occurred that has yet to be recovered. So let's take a look at the daily time frame and just kind of call it a day here, right? So when we look at the macro structure, I just want to kind of bring this to your understanding, your perspective. 240 was supposed to hold as a support. That certainly did not happen. So please recognize 240 is going to be the resistance for us too, right? So if you're going to be taken along with XRP, 240, 245, we've identified that ranges. There's a lot of liquidation there, but there's also a lot of resistance based on the point of control here on volume for the macro structure. All that said, we can see the price action pulling back here for RSI. This is nothing abnormal, but XRP did recover better recently than most other coins. Not to say that's not going to pull back too, it's just, it does tend to be showing a little bit more strength in this range. So I don't think XRP is kind of out of the woods yet, but I don't think it's under the gun either. I think that it's probably more likely than the rest of these coins we looked at to recover, just based on its previous market structure, right? And just how crazy, no, just for lack of better terms, the demographic is that invests in this coin, right? So all that being said, I think we're probably more likely to see 240, 245 if Bitcoin can sustain 104K and go higher. all it really needs to do is go to 105 or 106K. And I think these altcoins are going to pump on the short term to their local resistance, which is our previous support levels, all of which have been identified here. So those are kind of my thoughts. What are yours? Comment below. Love to hear it. Thanks again for being a phenomenal part of my life. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Have yourself a great rest of your day. Take care.